The NFL goes through a MAGA crisis once a year. However, I think this one is the most interesting. So Jaxson Dart, quarterback of the New York Giants, introduces Donald Trump and New York, and his teammates publicly on Twitter, Abdul Carter, quote tweets it and says, "Hey man, what the fuck are we doing?" And obviously, things were very civil. This is not the first time a New York Giants active player has criticized Donald Trump. Here you have Malik Neighbors agreeing with this person's tweets. I cannot read it out loud, however, you can read it yourself. To be fair, the conversation is what you expected it to be. It's people being like, "Hey, Jaxson Dart, what the fuck, man?" And then people being like, "Hey, Abdul Carter, shut the fuck up." I think this one right here was the most ridiculous, stating that, "And a world full of Colin Kaepernicks be a Jaxson Darts." And I waited a day to talk about this because I wanted everything to come out, and as expected, Abdul Carter puts out the tweet saying, "Hey, me and JD6, we are good. Keep your narratives to yourself." Funny enough, he uses the nickname JD6. Kind of like another J6 that I know about. I think everyone knows every inch of the dick in the NFL leans right, whether it be the players, the audience, the fan base. Truly the only American sports league that does lean to the left is the NBA. However, this is very interesting to me because Donald Trump is so decisive to the point where even a conservative league like the NFL has former and current players actively taking a stand against him. I mean, you had many Philadelphia Eagle players not go to the White House. I am a huge sports fan. I love the Lakers, love the Dodgers, unfortunately like the Raiders. And I love it when athletes speak up about things they care about because they are not just an athlete. They're a person. They're a person with influence here in this world, and they have a lot of younger people looking up to them. And the more we have people speaking up and standing up for things that they believe in, the more it encourages people to not just look at politics as if it's just this controversial topic that is taboo and that no one should touch, but more so a conversation that everyone should have because it affects all of us at the end of the day.
This was a real error on the part of Abdul Carter, not on the part of Jaxson Dart. Jaxson Dart was asked to do something to introduce the president of the United States. How many people get an opportunity to do something like that, regardless of who the president is? You may have hated Barack Obama. You may have hated Joe Biden. And some guys didn't want to go to the White House because they didn't like those presidents, just like other guys didn't want to go to the White House because they didn't like President Trump. But to put this out like a child on social media is ridiculous. And then when I heard, we spoke man to man. Yeah, there was only one man on that call, and that was Jaxson Dart. You were a man who was late to meetings. You were a man who didn't live up to your draft choice. You're a man who wanted to wear number 56. And by the way, your idol, number 56, has introduced Donald Trump numerous times. So I don't want to hear this. So he made another just boneheaded error by going to social media.
The View spent years telling us athletes and celebrities have a responsibility to use their platform. They said it loud, they said it proud, and they built entire segments around it. And now the rookie NFL quarterback does exactly that, and suddenly they want consequences, quote unquote. That's the whole video right there. Jaxson Dart, the New York Giants' new starting quarterback, walked out on his own weekend on his own time with zero obligation from anyone to introduce Donald Trump at a rally. And the moment that clip started circulating, the View panel lost it completely, calling it harmful to black people, calling it irresponsible, and basically going on national television to ask the NFL to do something about a young man who made a personal political choice on a Saturday afternoon. These are the exact same people who spent years cheering political athletes, holding them up as examples of courage, saying silence is complicity and public figures have a duty to speak up. So it seems very hypocritical because if you're saying that political athletes should be individuals that are examples of being courageous, it makes no sense because the only thing that changed between then and now isn't the action, it isn't the principle, it isn't the standard. The only thing that changed is the direction he pointed. And that one detail broke the whole argument wide open.
See, and the only people applauding them, though, are people that agree with them.
I actually do think you have an obligation. I think we are at a crisis point in this country. I think democracy is participatory. I think when you have a platform, that means you have an outsized voice. And when you have a platform, I think that you have a responsibility to speak up about what's going on in this country. In my view, silence is complicity.
And every minute,
we need every single ally to speak out.
Every day we get closer to an autocracy in this country. We're about to lose it. I think that people don't seem to understand what's going on.
But if I may say, okay, Billy Bob Thornton's one of my favorite actors. I'm never going to say a bad word about him, starting with that. But B, a lot of this table criticized George Clooney when he wrote his Biden op-ed.
So that was a flashback moment that I showed you guys. They don't want complicity. They want they want athletes to be courageous, and show courage. Now, looking at it currently, before I show you guys the clip of what's currently happening now, when you go back and actually look at what The View said in that clip that we just seen and what they were saying on The View before Jaxson Dart ever touched the microphone at a rally, because this is where the whole thing falls apart, and it falls apart fast. The panel wasn't just saying athletes have the right to speak up politically. They were saying athletes have an obligation to do it. Not a choice, not an option, an obligation. And they made that case over and over again with specific examples, real players, real moments, real applause. When LeBron James was getting political and people were telling him to shut up and dribble, The View defended him, called it brave, framed him as punching back against a system that didn't want athletes to have voices. When NFL players were kneeling during the national anthem and half the country was furious about it, The View was on the side of the kneelers, talking about courage and using your platform to say something meaningful. When Hollywood celebrities stood up at award shows and turned their speeches into political statements, The View loved it, calling it using a moment for something bigger than themselves, and built whole segments praising that instant. They didn't just tolerate political athletes, they celebrated them. They held them up as the standard, and they said, this is what you're supposed to do when you have a platform and you care about something. Now that Jaxson Dart steps up to a microphone on a Saturday on his own time off a football field, not during a game, not in a locker room interview, not on a press conference, at a rally, as a private citizen who also happens to play in the NFL, and introduces a political candidate he supports. And The View's response is that there needs to be consequences. The exact same action, the exact same principle they spent years building, it just pointed in a different direction, and suddenly the whole framework they constructed flips completely. That's not a position, that's a preference wearing a position's clothes. And the difference matters a lot because a real position applies regardless of who benefits from it. And what we're watching here is the opposite of that.
So, New York Giants quarterback Jaxson Dart surprised a lot of fans and some of his teammates Friday for this appearance off the field. Take a look.
What an honor, what a privilege it is to be here. And without further ado, I'm grateful, I'm honored, I'm pleasured to introduce the 45th and 47th President of the United States of America, President Donald J. Trump.
I want to thank Jaxson Dart. This is going to be a future Hall of Famer in my book. Thank you. Thank you, Jaxson. Great. I'm looking at Jaxson. I'd like to know, is there any woman in the audience that thinks they can tackle that guy? Because I'd like to meet you. I'd like to shake your hand. I don't know. Jaxson, you think you could play against women okay?
I don't know what all that was.
I find it mind-boggling that Whoopi Goldberg act like she doesn't recognize what humor is. And just to let you guys know, Jaxson Dart is a rookie quarterback for the New York Giants. He was obviously selected as in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft, 25th overall, and just finished his first professional season.
But some people were not happy with Dart's open political endorsement. I mean, isn't he entitled to his...
It's America.
I mean, he's entitled to his thing.
For somebody to back a guy like Trump, whose history in discrimination and racism goes back to housing discrimination.
In the 70s.
In the 70s, DEI attacks, and posting pictures of the Obamas as apes. When he's on a team that's 55% to 60%, the NFL is that many people, that much percentage of black people.
Yeah,
That is just the definition of stupidity and racist, in my opinion.
And the people on the field, having been on teams, the whole point is we're in this together. And it's kind of got that foxhole mentality. We're out there, we're playing together. To not, even if that is what you believe, which I let anyone, that's the beauty of America. It's the most liberal belief that we can all have our own belief. I get that. But there would be consequences. You're the quarterback, which is a central player on that field.
The leader.
A leader, and the majority, it's actually 75% of the New York Giants and the NFL as a whole are black or non-white.
Yeah.
To not think about the most recent offenses from the 8 video to these voting rights things, which even people that aren't that dialed in are recognizing, wait, are you now just going to marginalize and completely disenfranchise? To have thought about how that might feel to your team, the ones that are on the field with you, I would have handled it differently.
Well,
Maybe he needs a little extra padding.
Well, maybe. You know, I don't know. I know what happens when people get all over me when I say something that people don't like.
Yeah.
It's like, why don't you think about it? I do think about you. And, you know, this is something he's going to have to deal with and his teammates are going to have to deal with.
That's the thing for me is that I see it as a matter of free speech. He has every right to endorse the president, and his teammates have every right to criticize him for endorsing the president, which is what ended up happening. And it brings me back to remember the whole shut up and dribble debate. A lot of the right came for LeBron and Kevin Durant because they were criticizing Trump, and they were saying shut up and dribble. It goes both ways. These people have voices, they have agency, they have rights, these athletes, to do what they want. But I do think of the Michael Jordan quote, Republicans buy sneakers too, so do Democrats. And he just alienated a lot of Democrats with this choice. I think the easiest thing is like weigh the consequences if you're going to do it and don't complain on the other side if people aren't happy.
Well, and you need your linemen to protect you.
And well, you sure do need your offensive line to protect you. But the thing is, this was a choice, and it was a political one. And, you know, we're just not in normal times anymore. And so we know that when there have been abnormal times, like during the civil rights movement, you had athletes speak up. You had someone like Muhammad Ali, who took a stand against the Vietnam War. And then you've had Juan Carlos, who took a stand against what was happening here in the U.S. I think when you know the history of this president and you know the biases of this president, for a certain community, the Black community, for me, if this feels personal. And I think if you are someone who attacks the community to which I belong, and you support that, that tells me two things. Either one, you agree with his politics and you agree with his biases, or you can be adjacent to it, stomach it, and that means you are complicit in my view.
Yeah, there's a whole Congress. There's a whole Congress, all kinds of folks.
Yeah.
But we have to remember that his right to learn about consequences, because I think he's very young and maybe doesn't realize that there are consequences to these things. You know, he's entitled, but this book says if it's good enough for me, it's good enough for you.
Yeah.
Okay? If I got free speech, you got free speech. I don't have to like your speech. I don't have to like anything you say.
Fans, like Alyssa said, fans, supporters, they can respond in time.
That's right. And maybe that's what maybe it's not just how to take care of your money they should be teaching folks coming out of school, but what consequences are and what these kinds of things mean. So, you know, we all live in Loin.
Yeah.
Don't we, though? We live in Loin. We'll be right.
So here's what makes this so easy to see once you lay it flat and just look at it plainly. They never actually believed in the principle. What they believed in was the outcome. When athletes pushed politics in a direction the View agreed with, it was courage and responsibility and using your platform for good. When an athlete pushes politics in a direction the View doesn't agree with, suddenly the platform becomes dangerous and the behavior needs to be addressed by a sports league. The principle didn't change because principles don't change. What changed was the team, and that's the tell. Think about what it means to hold a principle genuinely. It means you apply it even when you don't like the result. It means if you believe athletes should be free to speak politically, you protect that freedom, even when an athlete says something you disagree with. And that's literally what a principle is. And the View can't do it because they were never actually arguing from principle. They were arguing from preference and dressing it up as principle to give it weight. And look, nobody is asking the View to agree with Jaxson Dart. Nobody is saying they have to like his politics or stop disagreeing with Trump. They can do all of that, and none of that is the problem. The problem is that you don't get to spend years building an argument that athletes must speak up, applauding every athlete who does, turning those athletes into examples of what courage looks like. And then the moment one athlete speaks up in the direction you hate, grab the rule book and flip it. You can't cheer the action and punish the action. You have to pick one and stay there. And the fact that they can't stay there tells you the only honest answer they'll never say out loud, which is that free speech to them means free to agree with them. And the second you step outside of that, it stops being brave and it starts being something that needs consequences. Now, let's get into the specific argument they made, because this is the part that really needs to get broken down slowly and clearly, because it doesn't hold up and it's worth understanding exactly why. See, The View framed Jaxson Dart's decision to support Trump as something actively harmful to black people, offensive to black people, like he committed some kind of act against an entire community just by showing up to a rally and saying a man's name in a microphone on the weekend. And when you hear that argument the first time, it might sound like it carries some weight. But then when you ask one simple common sense question, and the whole thing collapses. Who put The View in charge of speaking for every black person in America? Nobody. There wasn't a vote. There wasn't an election. A panel of TV hosts decided on their own that they represent the political feelings and interests of millions of people. And from that position, they declared that supporting a specific candidate is harmful to that community as a whole, which sounds like advocacy until you look at what it actually requires for you to believe. And it requires you to believe that black Americans all think alike and they are a monolith, and that they all land in the same political place, that there's one acceptable political position for an entire group of people. And if someone steps outside the box or that box, they done something to that community. That's not advocacy. That's the opposite of it. Black Americans voted for Trump, millions of them. In 2024, Trump pulled more black male voters than any Republican presidential candidate in decades. And that's not a talking point. That's what the numbers showed. And those were real people making real choices with their own reasoning in a free country. So when The View says supporting Trump hurts black people, they're not protecting black people. They're telling millions of black voters that their own choice hurts themselves. And they're saying those voters got it wrong. And there's no version of that argument that's respectful to those voters. Jaxson Dart didn't go to that rally and say anything hateful. He didn't bring race into it. He didn't do anything during the game or in the locker room. He showed up as a private citizen who also plays football and introduced someone he supports. And that's it. And the act itself is completely ordinary because regular people introduce speakers at events every single day and nobody calls a press conference about it. So the quote unquote hurting black people framing only works if you accept a version of that community where everyone thinks the same, and any deviation from the approved political lane is an offense against the group. And that framing isn't protection, it's a box. And the people building the box are the ones calling themselves the protectors. So let's just call it what it actually is, because the word quote unquote consequences is doing enormous work in this conversation, and it deserves to get unpacked completely too, because they're not using it vaguely. When The View says there should be consequences for Jaxson Dart, they're talking about professional consequences. They mean the NFL or the New York Giants should step in and do something about this, which means they are asking a sports organization to punish a player's career because of a personal political choice he made on his own time in his own life with no connection to his job or his team. And then you wonder why this whole thing of cancel culture has become so popular. And when you say it that plainly, it sounds extreme because it is extreme. A television panel watched a young man introduce a political candidate at a rally on Saturday afternoon, and their response was to go on national TV and pressure a sports league to discipline him for it. And that's not a free speech conversation anymore. That's using a public platform and institutional pressure to try to silence a political opinion they disagree with. And dressing it up with words like accountability and responsibility doesn't change what it is, because if you strip all those words away, what's left is simpler. Agree with us or we'll come after your livelihood. And here's what you always notice when the media goes after someone like this: they never actually engage with whether the person did something wrong. They go straight to what should happen to that person. And the reason for that is if they had to engage with whether Dart actually did something wrong, the conversation would be over in 2 sentences, because he didn't break a law, he didn't violate a contract, he didn't say anything hateful, he didn't do anything to anyone. There's nothing to argue on that side. So instead of engaging with the act, they jump straight to punishment, and the speed of that jump tells you everything about how strong the actual argument is. Now flip the scenario. Picture an NFL quarterback walking up to a podium at a Democratic rally and introducing a Democratic candidate. Does The View go on air the next morning demanding the league investigate him? No. They put him on the show. They call him brave. They run the clip. They talk about athletes having a duty to use their platform for change. And we know this because we watched them do exactly that for years. So if the same action gets praised in one direction and punished in the other, it was never about the action. And it also raises the question of now, does this also influence another form of which we're seeing more than ever today, currently, political violence? Because now you are an enemy and you should be basically punished or erased because I disagree with you. So there's no productive conversation anymore. It's more so, you disagree with me, so I don't like you, so you should get gone. Because that's what's being advocated ignorantly as some individuals that are supposedly like Whoopi Goldberg are elder or older adults who you think would be grown since they're coming at Jaxson Dart for being so young, quote unquote. So when you look at it, right, it was always about the side. And when you admitted that, you admitted the whole thing is a weapon and not a standard when it comes to The View. You have to be on their side and agree with what they say and agree with them politically. Because a standard applies to everyone equally, regardless of which direction they're pointing at. And what The View is pushing only applies to people who step out of the approved political lane. Jaxson Dart is a free American citizen. He played no games, broke no rules, hurt nobody, made a personal choice on his weekend. And a group of television hosts decided he should lose professional standing for it. That's not accountability. That's bullying with a press pass. So at the end of all this, the point is simple, and it doesn't require a law degree or a political science background to see it. The View doesn't want free speech. They want approved speech. And when someone steps outside the approval, they don't respond with a counter argument. They respond with a demand for consequences. And that response is a tell, because if you had a real argument, you'll make it. You wouldn't need to go after someone's job to win the debate. Real principles don't come with expectations for the wrong political team. I mean, put it like this. Real principles don't come with exceptions, not expectations. Exceptions for the wrong political team. And if your principle only protects the people you agree with, it isn't a principle at all. So drop a comment and tell me where you stand. Should athletes face professional punishment for what they do in their own time off the field with no connection to their job? I want to hear it. And if you want more breakdowns that cut through the noise instead of adding to it, subscribe, because we do this every week, every single day. Catch you the next one. On that note, peace.